When you stop the chase, a silent cataclysm occurs. Not on the outside, but within her. Your silence isn't a vacuum. It's a pressure that forces the seams of her familiar world to burst. She was used to being the center of gravity, and you've simply shifted into a different orbit. Do you think your departure is the end of the story? No, it's the beginning of her complete psychological reboot. And today, with the wisdom of Carl Jung, we will dissect this process and see what happens to her consciousness when you reclaim your right to choose. By the way, let me know in the comments if you've ever deliberately distanced yourself from someone just to see their true reaction. I'm curious about the experience you gained from it. Part 1. When her universe collapses, the moment you stop pursuing her, the first blow doesn't land on you. It lands on her. The silence you create isn't perceived by her as a neutral pause. To her, it's the deafening echo of her own insignificance. A silent verdict delivered not by a judge, but by the void in your dialogue. And at that moment, her carefully constructed self-confidence doesn't just waver. It experiences a colossal overload. Understand, she has spent years building her persona, as Jung would call it, that ideal mask she presents to society. She honed the art of being desired, learning to control attention without showing any need for it. She created an image that, in her coordinate system, was supposed to work flawlessly. And then you break this algorithm. You refuse to play the role that so many have played before you. And her mind, deprived of its usual external stimulus, turns inward and begins a ruthless audit of her own value. Questions swarm in her head. Is my magic not working anymore? Has the charm that used to attract effortlessly finally failed? Your composure makes her doubt her every move. Maybe she chose the wrong tone? Maybe it was how she looked that day? Was she too distant? Or, on the contrary, too open? It's an exhausting self-analysis where every answer seems to be against her. Her power was always built on an unspoken rule. She could attract a man without revealing her soul to him. She was the lighthouse, and men were the ships sailing toward her light. But you changed course. You are no longer heading for her shore. And in her reality, this feels like a shift of tectonic plates. Any loss of balance gives rise to a deep-seated anxiety. The most painful thing for her is not that you aren't texting. It's that you no longer seem to need her. She is confronted with the thought that she isn't as exclusive as she believed. That, perhaps for the first time in her life, she is not the one dictating the rules. And this hits more than just her pride. It hits the very foundation of her personality. Because women like her don't just enjoy attention, they use it as the building material for their self-esteem. When this resource is cut off, she doesn't just get sad. She begins to doubt her feminine power. She replays your last encounters in her mind. Her smile, her cold gaze that was meant to ignite the thrill of the chase in you. And she searches for the error in the code. Why did the technique that always worked lead to the opposite result this time? And it drives her mad. Because if she miscalculated with you, where else might she have been wrong? At this moment, her confidence begins to crumble like old plaster. Outwardly, she will remain impenetrable. But inside, a conflict is already raging. The conflict between her ideal self-image and the reality your silence has created. If you recognize this stage, support the video with a like, so I know we're talking about real things. Part 2. Under the microscope. You are her main subject. You stop the pursuit. She doesn't disappear. She lies in wait. And she begins to watch. Quietly, methodically, with cold calculation. The moment you disrupt the familiar hunter-prey dance, she doesn't step aside. She takes out her microscope. You might think she has grown cold or lost interest. Quite the opposite. She shifts into a new mode, that of a researcher. She is studying the anomaly, which is you, not out of anger, but with scientific curiosity and female intuition. Your refusal to chase doesn't cast you out of her thoughts. It places you right at their center, under a bright spotlight. You are no longer an extra in her play. You are the main puzzle. And nothing excites a woman's mind like a mystery that needs to be solved. And right now, to her, you are a closed book in an unfamiliar language. Every action you take, or rather your inaction, becomes a piece of evidence for her. The time it takes for you to reply, your lack of reaction to her new photo, every hour of your silence, it all turns into a cipher she tries to crack. She watches how you exist without her approval. She analyzes your circle, your activities, what you now spend your energy on now that it's been freed up. And the less feedback you give her, the more of her own resources she invests in trying to understand your essence. Remember, when a woman cannot predict a man's behavior, she doesn't leave for another. She becomes a shadow hunting for the truth. And here's the point that many men miss. Women see the details. Not out of idle curiosity, but because their intuition is a built-in safety radar. By stopping the chase, you change the signal on that radar. You no longer appear as an emotionally available and understandable man. You now seem like a person who has his own world hidden from her. And this is both frightening and incredibly attractive to her. She begins to study you like a psychoanalyst studies a patient. Not just what you say, but where you use an ellipsis. For her, silence is also information, and she reads it very carefully. She doesn't need to ask you questions. She sees everything for herself. She sees when you are online, who you've started talking to, what new interests you have. And although you aren't paying her any attention, she knows exactly where it's directed now. Because for her, this has become a matter of principle. Before, you were one of many orbiting her. Now, you are an independent celestial body with your own gravitational pull. And this forces her to see you in a completely different, more significant light. You are no longer a contestant auditioning for the role of her admirer. You are the only one who didn't break when she decided to test your strength. And this sparks a desire in her to find out who you really are, without the masks and roles. Have you ever experienced this kind of scanning? Share your experience in the comments. Part 3. Ghosts in her head when you stop chasing her. One destructive thought begins to dominate her mind. He's found someone else, not just someone else, but someone better. The female ego rarely allows for the possibility that a man could choose solitude or self-development over her. Her mind automatically completes the reality to the most painful scenario. You didn't leave for nothing, but for someone. And this thought begins to eat away at her from the inside like rust. Because now the focus shifts. The problem isn't that you left her. The problem is who you went to. The idea that another woman now possesses the attention she considered her property is not a thought that can be simply brushed aside. She feels it almost physically. She replays the details of your breakup in her mind, the speed with which you disappeared, your confidence, your outward calm. In her worldview, such composure is not born from inner harmony. It is born from an external alternative. If you are calm, unperturbed, and focused on something else, her brain refuses to accept that you've simply found your zen. It whispers to her that your emotional space, which she considered hers, is now occupied by someone else. Her pride cannot accept that a man might leave to find himself. It's much easier to believe that he left to find another. This thought poisons her like a slow-acting venom, and your silence suddenly becomes louder than any scream. What's worse, she involuntarily starts comparing herself to women who may not even exist. She paints them in her imagination. Smarter, gentler, more interesting. She creates a whole legion of phantom rivals in her mind. Not because you gave her a reason, but because her pride cannot bear the thought that you chose emptiness over her company. That would mean she didn't leave a deep mark on your soul, that she was ordinary, So her mind constructs an explanation that is both comforting and wounding. Comforting because you are still involved in a relationship. Wounding because it's not with her. And here, an absurd theater begins. She enters into a battle with these shadows. Her social media posts become carefully crafted messages. Her appearance becomes a challenge. Her online activity increases, not out of happiness, but from a desire to outplay the other woman she has invented. This invisible battle becomes her new obsession. She doesn't need to win you back as much as she needs to claim victory, to prove, primarily to herself, that she is still the standard, that she is a force that cannot be simply written off. And every time she sees your name online, she looks for traces of this other woman. And it hurts. Not because you're not with her, but because your value in her eyes has skyrocketed. You are no longer just a man who backed away. You are a man who had and has options, and you made your choice. And that means you weren't needy. You were selective. And in her world, selectivity is synonymous with power. If you've made it this far, put a plus in the comments. It will be a sign for me that the topic is resonating. Part 4. Hidden traps and quiet tests when you back off. She doesn't always go on the attack. She doesn't send angry messages, call, or demand explanations. No, her strategy is far more elegant and cunning. She starts to probe you, but she does it indirectly. Her tests are never overt. They are woven into pauses, disguised as indifference, and perfectly calculated to sow doubt in your soul. She creates episodes of silence, but this silence is not empty. It rings with tension and the unspoken question, is he still holding on? This is not so much a conscious manipulation as a self-preservation instinct wrapped in a game. It's critically important for her to understand whether your distance is genuine or just a tactical move. So she creates a void to see if you will rush to fill it. She pulls away just enough to check if you will take a step toward her. She might post something with an ambiguous subtext, intentionally act cold, pretending that nothing is wrong. But behind every such action is a cold calculation. That photo wasn't just a photo. That song in her status wasn't random. Her sudden appearance where you might be was no coincidence. These are all elements of a silent game, the goal of which is to understand if she still holds any power over your attention. The reason for these tests is not that she doubts you. She doubts herself. She desperately needs confirmation that her image still lives in your head, that even in your silence, she continues to matter. These small provocations are not calls to action, but rather sonar pings sent into your silence. And if you react, if you respond too hastily, if you show that you are watching her, you give her what she craves. She wins, not the relationship, but a round in the battle for emotional dominance. She can breathe freely again, having confirmed that her charms still work. But if you remain silent, if you stay calm, remain in your silence, and continue on your path, she doesn't feel like a winner. She feels vulnerable, because now she has proof. Her energy no longer controls yours. And at this moment, her test becomes a mirror for her. She sees that the attention she used to get at the snap of her fingers is now slipping away like sand. And not because she has become less beautiful or interesting, but because you have stopped being predictable. You have developed an immunity to her tricks, and she has never known how to fight immunity. And when all her ploys fail to produce a result, she is confronted with the most terrifying feeling for her, the feeling of her own insignificance. By the way, if you're interested in the topic of such hidden tests and want to learn more about them, let me know with a like. The more likes, the sooner I'll prepare material on this topic. Part 5. The Greatest Fear. Losing control when you stop pursuing her. Something more fundamental than resentment or anger surfaces. It's her deep-seated fear of losing control. Not so much over you, but over the entire situation and her own emotions. Control has always been her main support, her invisible shield, her most effective weapon. She didn't need to command openly. It was enough for her to know that she could influence the course of events, that her mood changed yours, that her silence hurt you more than words, and that her absence made you anxious. But when you demonstrate self-sufficiency, when you pull away and don't lose your balance, she physically feels that power slipping through her fingers. And it terrifies her. She was used to pulling the strings without applying force. It's the art of subtle management. A barely noticeable gesture, a reply delayed by several hours, a social media story posted at the perfectly calculated moment. She has mastered this language of female influence, where every little detail can trigger an emotional wave in a man. She masterfully knows how to make you doubt, reflect, and strive for her. And when this rich arsenal suddenly proves useless, when you don't react, don't chase, don't break, she is faced with a completely new feeling, powerlessness. And for a woman who has spent years honing the art of emotional management, powerlessness is like being in a boat without oars in the middle of the ocean. That this fear doesn't manifest in hysterics. It is born in silence. In those moments when she mechanically refreshes the chat where your message has yet to appear. In the way she stares at her reflection longer than usual, trying to find the answer to whether she still possesses the same power. Her thoughts become viscous, chaotic. She tries to rewind the tape to understand at what point she lost the initiative, how it happened that the script was rewritten without her knowledge. Because as soon as she loses the ability to predict your actions, she loses the ability to control you. And when she can't control, she feels she is losing the only way of interacting with the world she has ever known. It's not about you leaving. It's about what that means. And it means that you are self-sufficient, that her presence is not a necessary condition for your happiness, that you are living, growing, and breathing freely without her approval. And this autonomy of yours is what truly throws her off balance. Because if you don't need her, then she is no longer the main character. She becomes a secondary character in a story she can no longer control. Do you agree that the fear of losing control is often stronger than the fear of losing a person? Alike if you think this idea is true. Part 6. When the mirror cracked. And so, we arrive at the finale of her internal odyssey. When you stop pursuing her, she doesn't start doubting you. She starts doubting herself. And this isn't just a prick to her pride. It's a deep crack in the foundation of her self-esteem. Her internal question transforms from "why did he do that?" to "why wasn't I enough for him to stay?" She is forced to remove all the protective masks she has grown so accustomed to. She is left alone, in complete silence, alone with thoughts from which the attention of others usually saved her. Women often perceive their value not as an absolute quantity, but as a reflection in the eyes of others, especially in the eyes of men. And when you stop being that mirror, when your reaction is one of calm indifference, she is left alone with the original, unadorned. And without that reflection, her self-confidence begins to shatter. She replays all her trump cards in her mind, her gaze, her hints, her charm that worked unfailingly on others. And for the first time, it didn't work. At this moment, her confidence suffers a shock. Not because she is bad or worthless, but because you cease to be the external confirmation of that value. And in this void, in this emotional vacuum, her mind begins to devour itself. Any compliment from the past now seems fake. Any former relationships where she was pursued seem like a mere stroke of luck. Your silence forces her to face herself, without a support group and applause. The most terrifying part of this process is that it is invisible to others. She won't complain to her friends. She won't write a post about it. She might even demonstratively show how happy and free she is. But inside, A slow and painful dismantling of the personality she considered unshakable is taking place. She begins to measure herself by your silence. Each new day without your message is further proof that perhaps she wasn't as special as she thought. That all her beauty, intelligence, charisma, everything she considered sufficient, could not keep you. And even if she remained strong on the outside, a question gnaws at her from within. Was this strength genuine? Or was it just an illusion that worked until the first serious failure? This is the moment of truth that no one sees. Only her and the mirror. Only her and the silence, full of questions without answers. Support the video with a like if it gave you food for thought. And here is the main question for everyone who has watched up to this point. Are you ready to find such inner strength that your happiness does not depend on the attention of others? Or is the habit of seeking validation of your worth in a woman's eyes still too strong? Men, understand the main point. Your detachment is not manipulation. It is a declaration of sovereignty. By ceasing to pursue, you do not lose her. You get yourself back. You force her to look inside herself, not to seek answers in you. You force her to reconsider her entire value system, which was built on the external. And in this silence, you gain true weight. Not because you are playing by some rules, but because you have left the game and started living by your own. You chose your integrity, not her approval. Let her go through this. Let her rethink everything. Because when a man stops pursuing, he doesn't end the story. He starts a new one. One in which he no longer seeks recognition, because he has finally recognized himself. Thank you for being with me. If this analysis was valuable to you, subscribe to the channel. Here, we talk about relationship psychology without illusions.